Okay, let's keep reading this Secret 7. We are up to chapter 4. Is it an adventure? Colin slid down the tree. He stood at the foot, looking warily around. Nobody was in sight. The man had completely vanished. I'll run at top speed and hope for the best, thought Colin, and off he went. Nobody stopped him. Nobody yelled at him. He felt rather ashamed of himself when he came to the field path and saw the cows staring at him in surprise. He went back to the farmhouse where Peter and Janet lived. Maybe the Secret 7 was still down in the shed, stripped of their American Indian things and wiping the paint off their face. He ran down the path to the shed. The door was shut as usual. The SS showed up well with the 2 letters painted so boldly. There was the sound of voices from inside the shed. Colin knocked. "Let me in," he said. "I'm back too." There was a silence. The door didn't open. Colin banged again impatiently. "You know it's only me. Open the door." Still, it didn't open. And then Colin remembered he must give the password, of course. What in the world was it? Thankfully, he remembered it as he caught a glimpse of a brilliant American Indian feathers through the shed window. "Indians!" he shouted. The door opened. "And now everybody in the district knows our latest password," said Peter's voice in disgust. "We'll have to choose another. Come in. Wherever have you been? We yelled and yelled for you at Little Thicket." "I know. I heard you," said Colin, stepping inside. "I'm sorry I shouted out the password like that. I wasn't thinking, but I've got some news. Most peculiar news." "What?" asked everyone, and stopped rubbing the paint from their faces. "You know when Peter stood up and shouted out that he'd found a man hiding, don't you?" said Colin. "Well, I was quite nearby. As a matter of fact, I was up a tree." "Cheat," said George. "That's not playing American Indians." "Who said it wasn't?" demanded Colin. "I bet American Indians climb trees as well as wriggling on their tummies. Anyway, I was up in that tree, and guess what? The man that Peter found came running up my tree and climbed it too." "Gosh," said George. "What did you do?" "Nothing," said Colin. "He didn't come up quite as far as I was, so I just sat tight and I didn't make a sound. I saw him before Peter did. Actually, I saw him on the top of the wall that surrounds Milton Manor. Then he dropped down, ran to the thicket and disappeared." "What happened in the end?" asked Janet, excited. "After you'd all gone, he slid down the tree and went," said Colin. I didn't see him anymore. I slid down too and ran for home. I felt a bit scared, actually." "Whatever was he doing, behaving like that?" wondered Jack. "What was he like?" "Well, I only saw the top of his head and his ears," said Colin. "Did you see him closely, Peter?" "Yes, fairly," said Peter, "but he wasn't anything out of the ordinary, really. Clean-shaven, dark-haired, nothing much to remember him by." "Well, I suppose that's the last we'll hear of him," said Barbara. The adventure that passed us by. We shall never know exactly what he was doing and why." "He spoilt our afternoon anyway," said Pam. "Not that we'd have caught Colin hiding up a tree like that. We'll have to make a rule that trees are not to be climbed when we're playing at stalking." "When's our next meeting, and are we going to have a new password?" asked Janet. "We'll meet on Wednesday evening," said Peter. "Keep your eyes and ears open for anything exciting or mysterious or adventurous. As usual, it is a pity we didn't capture that man or find out more about him. I'm sure he was up to no good." "What about a password?" asked Janet again. "Well, we'll have adventure, I think," said Peter, seeing we've just missed one. They all went their several ways home, and, except for Colin, nobody thought much more of the peculiar man at Little Thicket. But the radio that evening suddenly made all of the Secret 7 think of him again. "Lady Lucy Thomas's magnificent and unique pearl necklace was stolen from her bedroom at Milton Manor this afternoon," said the announcer. "Nobody saw the thief or heard him, and he got away in safety." Peter and Janet sprang up at once. "That's the man we saw," yelled Peter. "Would you believe it? Call a meeting of the Secret 7 for tomorrow, Janet. This is an adventure again." Chapter 5. That night, the Secret 7 were very excited. Janet and Peter had slipped notes into everyone's letterbox. "Meeting at 9:30. Important, SSS." Colin and George had no idea at all what was up, because they hadn't listened to the radio. But the others had all heard of the theft of Lady Lucy Thomas's necklace, and knowing that she lived by Little Thicket, they guessed that the meeting was to be about finding the thief. At 9:30, the society met. Janet and Peter were ready for them in the shed. Raps at the door came steadily. "Password," called Peter, sternly each time. "Adventure," said everyone in a low voice. "Adventure, adventure." One after another, the members were admitted to the shed. "Where's that awful sister of yours, Susie?" Peter asked Jack. "I hope she's not about anywhere. This is a really important meeting today. Got your badge?" "Yes," said Jack. "Susie's gone out for the day anyway. She doesn't know our latest password." "What's the meeting about?" asked Colin. "I know something's up by the look on Janet's face. She looks as if she's going to burst." "You'll feel like bursting when you know," said Janet, "because you're going to be rather important, seeing that you and Peter are the only ones who saw the thief we're going after." Colin and George looked blank. They didn't know what Janet was talking about, of course. Peter soon explained. "You know the man that Colin saw yesterday climbing over the wall that runs around Milton Manor?" said Peter. "The one I saw hiding in the bush, and then he went and climbed up into the very tree Colin was hiding in? Well, it said on the radio last night that a thief had got into Lady Lucy Thomas's bedroom and taken her magnificent pearl necklace." "Gracious," said Pam with a squeal. "And that was the man you and Colin saw?" "Yes," said Peter. "It must have been. And now the thing is, what do we do about it? This is an adventure. If only we can find that man, and if only we could find the necklace too. That would be a fine feather in the cap of the Secret Seven." There was a short silence. Everyone was thinking hard. "But how can we find him?" asked Barbara at last. "I mean, only you and Colin saw him, Peter, and then just for a moment." "And don't forget that I only saw the top of his head and the tips of his ears," said Colin. "I'd like to know how I could possibly know anyone from those things." "Anyway, I can't go about looking at the tops of people's heads." Janet laughed. "You'd have to carry a stepladder about with you," she said, and that made everyone else laugh too. "Oughtn't we tell the police?" asked George. "I suppose so," said Peter, considering the matter carefully. "Not that we can give them any help at all, really. Still, that's the first thing to be done. Then maybe we could help the police. And anyway, we could snoop around and see if we can find anything on our own." "Let's go down to the police station now," said George. "That would be an exciting thing to do. Won't the inspector be surprised when we march in, all 7 of us?" They left the shed and went down to the town. They trooped up to the steps of the police station, much to the astonishment of a young policeman inside. "Can we see the inspector?" asked George. "We've got some news for him about the thief that stole Lady Lucy's necklace." The inspector had heard the clatter of so many feet and looked out of his room. "Hello, hello," he said. "Please, the Secret Seven again. And what's the password this time?" Nobody told him, of course. Peter grinned. "We just came to say we saw the thief climb over the wall of Milton Manor yesterday," he said. "He hid in a bush first and then in a tree where Colin was hiding, but that's about all we know." The inspector soon got every single detail from the 7, and he looked very pleased. "What beats me is how the thief climbed that enormous wall," he said. "He must be able to climb like a cat. There was no ladder used. Well, Secret 7, there's nothing much you can do, I'm afraid, except keep your eyes open in case you see this man again. The only thing is, Colin only saw the top of his head and I only caught a quick glimpse of him. And he looks so very, very ordinary," said Peter. "Still, you can't be sure. We'll do our best. You can be sure we'll do our best." Off they went again down the steps into the street. "And now," said Peter, "we'll go to the place where Colin saw the man getting over the wall. We just might find something there. You never know." Some peculiar finds. The 7 made their way to Little Thicket, where they had played their game of American Indians the day before. "Now, where exactly did you say that the man climbed over?" Peter asked Colin. Colin considered. Then he pointed to a holly tree. "See that holly? Well, he came over the wall between that tree and the little oak. I'm pretty certain that was exactly the place." "Come on then, we'll go and see," said Peter, feeling really rather important. The 7 walked across Little Thicket and came to the place between the holly tree and the little oak. They stood and gazed up at the wall. It was at least 2 meters high. How could anyone climb a sheer wall like that without even a ladder? "Look, here's where he leapt down," said Pam. Suddenly, and she pointed to a deep mark in the ground near the holly tree. They all looked. Yes, that must have been where his feet landed, said George. Pity we can't tell anything from the mark. I mean, if it had been footprints, for instance, it would have helped a lot, but it's only just a deep mark, probably made by his heels. I wish we could go to the other side of the wall, said Peter. Suddenly, we might perhaps find a footprint or two there. Let's go and ask the gardener if we can go into the grounds. He's a friend of the cowman who works on our farm, and he knows me. Good idea, said George. So off they all went again. The gardener was working inside the front garden beyond the great iron gates. The children called to him, and he looked up. Hey, John, shouted Peter. Could we come in and look around? About the thief, you know. We saw him climb over the wall, and the inspector of police has asked us to keep our eyes open, so we're looking around. John grinned. He opened the gates. Well, if I come with you, I don't reckon you can do much harm, he said. Beats me how that thief climbed those walls. I was working here in the front garden all yesterday afternoon, and if he'd come in at the gates, I'd have seen him. But he didn't. The 7 children went round the walls with John. Colin saw the top of the holly tree and the top of the little nearby oak just jutting above the wall. He stopped. This is where he climbed up, he said. Now let's look for footprints. There were certainly marks in the earth, but no footprints. The 7 bent over the marks. Funny, aren't they? Said Peter, puzzled. Quite round and regular, and about 10 centimetres across, as if someone had been pounding about with a large-sized broom handle, hammering the end of it into the ground. What could have made these marks, John? Beats me, said John, also puzzled. Maybe the police will make something of them, now they know you saw the thief climb over the wall just here. Everyone studied the round, regular marks again. There seemed no rhyme or reason for them at all. They looked for all the world as if someone had been stabbing the ground with the tip of a broom handle or something. And why should anyone do that? And anyway, if they did, how would it help them climb over a wall? There's been no ladder used, that I can say, said John. All mine are locked up in the shed, and there they are. There they all are still, and the keys in my pocket. How that fellow climbed this steep wall, I can't think. He must have been an acrobat, that's all, said Janet, looking up at the top of the wall. Then she spotted something and pointed to it in excitement. Look! What's that? Caught on that sharp bit of brick up there, halfway up. Everyone stared. It looks like a bit of wool, said Pam at last. Perhaps when the thief climbed up, that sharp bit caught his clothes, and a bit of wool was pulled out. Help me up, George, ordered Peter. I'll get it. It might be a very valuable clue. George hoisted him up, and Peter made a wild grab at the piece of wool. He got it, and George led him down to the ground again. They all gathered round to look at it. It was really rather ordinary, just a bit of blue wool thread with a tiny red strand in it. Everyone looked at it earnestly. Well, it might have been pulled out of the thief's jumper, said Janet at last. We can all look out for somebody wearing a blue wool pullover with a tiny thread of red in it. And then they found something else, something much more exciting.